Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about French whiskey, possibly for the first time on this podcast, actually. And I'm thrilled to welcome on Allison Parc. She is the president, the founder of Brenne Whiskey. She herself is based in New York City with whiskey made in the cognac region of France. So, Allison, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I want to start with a quick throwback to before your whiskey career, which was when you were a professional ballerina. And I've got to start by asking, were you Block, Capizio, or Freed?
Wow. Wow. I'm so impressed that you know that. I was definitely a block girl. Serenade were my point shoes.
Okay.
How did you know?
I'm a nonprofit fundraiser. I used to work for a ballet company here in the city. So,
Amazing.
uh, got to throw that in somewhere if it's usable. So, figure why not? Uh,
I'm so
so,
impressed.
so, I do have to ask though. So, you were a block girl after 13 years in the whiskey business, and hundreds potentially of interviews and shows and everything you've done. Have you gotten tired of hearing bar to bar yet?
No, I think at some point, if I ever decide to write a memoir about this particular time in my life, I think that it has come forward as it's probably the best title that's sitting there.
Might just be, it is what it is. It's too perfect to
Yeah.
ignore. Um, so as noted, you originally were a professional ballerina from when you were 9 to when you were 23. Then I'm skipping over some parts of the origin story just because it's been you've told on other podcasts, and I want to make full use of our time. So skipping a little bit forward, you were speaking in 2020, so it's the height of COVID, with a friend of mine, Tim, at Whiskey Wednesdays and Five Drinks at Midnight, and you're talking about things from being a professional artist and performer that serve you well in what you're doing now, including things like it's your responsibility to act on your vision, your dreams, uh, all this, also this idea. Oh, let's start with that one. So it's your responsibility to act on your vision, your dreams. uh, it's a very strong sentiment. I like it. um, what else do you think has still continued, you know 20 years after you've stopped performing professionally, continue to inform your day-to-day activities with the brands?
Mm. Well, first of all, love Tim. Love that whole Whiskey Wednesday community. And I really love all the whiskey communities around the world. So it's always such an honor to get to connect and share. And I just feel like in life, it's such a beautiful opportunity to open up a great bottle of whiskey, pour a nice dram, and share and converse and connect. So I really thank you for having me on today. I I do a lot, not a lot, but I do keynote speeches around when people invite me into their organizations and conferences. And one of the things I've started doing recently is ask people to close their eyes and trust that I will not call on them, or there's no like call out. And I just ask people to raise their hands if they have a dream that they have yet to take action on. And then every time I've done this, if it's a room of 100 people, maybe only 2 people have their hand down. Like it's an overwhelming number of hands that are up. And then I ask people if they're courageous enough to keep their arms raised, open their eyes, and take a look around the room. And to hear people go, it's such a visceral reaction to seeing how many unrealized dreams there are, right? And in ballet, when you are dedicating so much of your life in early stages of your life to a craft, to a dream, to something that you have been told countless times by adults, almost what an unreasonable dream, because the money isn't good, you're going to age out. There's all these very logical life reasons not to pursue a career in the arts, and especially arts where your physical body is in such high demand and such high use, and it really does time out pretty early on, right, in one's life cycle. So in your early 20s or late 20s or early 30s, you're kind of retired. So I think to make the sacrifices required to even have a shot at getting that, like being that, like that one in 500, 1 in 3,000 people that might make it in your 20s to into a professional ballet company is wild, right? And I think it takes a particular kind of, I don't know, maybe neurological like off wiring from most people to choose those odds. And for me, when it comes to entrepreneurial adventures, when it came to creating Brenne, I just heard from so many people the rate of failure for most companies, the number of brands that were, that like, which was zero, right? Like the number of companies that were doing anything like I was trying to do, they were like zero. So why would you ever do it? Right. And to me, those always seem like portals, like portals into the realm of a potential future that the world has yet to realize. And maybe I get to be the one to pull it from the ethers or pull it from an idea down into physical form. So I think to act on the vision of your dreams is very, it takes someone with a lot of stones, and it takes someone with a lot of belief and a lot of focus, and a willingness to move through the fears, right? The fears that society put on you, the fears that you'll put on yourselves. Because when I talk to a lot of people who all have dreams, the thing that stops them is themselves, right? Like if you're in a job and you want to switch careers, I'm like, cool, like what do you need to do that? And they're like, oh, I need to learn something. I'm like, okay, well, show me in your week where you're putting an hour aside to learn that thing. And it's that most people hold themselves up to the end result of a dream, and from where they are to where that end result of a dream is feels so big and feels so insurmountable, they usually won't take the little steps to get to that vision. And I'm like, but you're not going from where you are today to like selling a multi-million-dollar company, right? You're going from where you are today to like picking up the phone and learning one thing about it. And it's all of those steps in a row that compound into the realization of a dream.
There are two subsequent sentiments that I think are really important to bring up. One from Rose Mansion. You wanted to create something in brand whiskey that people either loved or hated, because that meant that it was different enough to demand a feeling. And then on Combustion Chronicles, it was the idea that, as a ballerina, as a performer, you want to be front and center. You want to strive for correction and critique, because otherwise, if you're off on the sides, it doesn't matter how good you are. You have to be noticed, and you have to be willing to be front and center and take that critique, because that means they care about you and are taking notice, and you're doing something right. So in that, it's that responsibility to act on your dreams, but also the willingness to be exposed like that, to critique, because that's the only way you're going to be noticed. And we'll go into a couple of the other challenges that you faced growing into the business and moving over to it. So starting off in the business, so Brent starts in 2012. Before that, you'd had a couple of years of exploring the whiskey space. One of the things I found surprising just doing the research was on Rose and Ivy, you were asked, like, did you have a mentor or a guide in this? And he said no. You had a very supportive group of friends, people like Philippe at Whisky Magazine France, who were connectors and supporters, but not a formal mentor. Was there a point in your journey, either before or after Brenne was formally started, where you were searching for that kind of a mentor role?
Yeah, I think maybe unconsciously I was certainly searching for it. And then Brenne has such an interesting story from like a corporate structure perspective, right? This is I self-funded, which was wild. And then in 2017, I merged it into the ever growing at that time company called Samson and Surrey, which then, as a whole entity of Samson and Surrey, we grew to 6 brands, a lot of them more notable than Brenne. And then we sold that to Heaven Hill, right? And so there was a 5-year period where I was a partner at Samson and Surrey. I was still president of Brenne. And it was in that kind of incubated time where some of the shareholders or some of the people in the C-suite, like some of the people in director, department head roles, I would say I didn't have like one mentor in a kind of corporate or nonprofit structure. Like there was someone who's really watching out for me and watching out for my career and became like a person that I would always like come to when I realized I was stuck, right? But it was more like there were these really brilliant people around me and really kind and all wanted everyone to win mentality around me that I felt the trust was there and there was safety that I could go to them and be like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or I don't know how to do this, or I'm sitting here, here's my idea. Who do I bring this to? Or is this stupid? Or what do you see around this idea that I don't even have the experience yet to see. So like when Samson and Surrey merged into Heaven Hill and I stepped back from running Brenne full time, it's been really beautiful the last 2.5 years to really see who of that communities have stayed in my life and have really kind of morphed over into true friendships. And there's been a lot more than I think I would have said in the beginning. Yeah.
It's something that's echoed a lot. Just the welcomingness of the community as a whole, and really spans across borders, across sectors in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as we said, it takes a lot of, you said, stones to start a business of any kind, especially in spirits. And you got a lot of no's at the beginning, a lot of rejection. But you said, even today, the people who said no to you are there's no like hostility, there's no resent. It's like they know they missed out at this point. And even the people who have said no have since rallied behind and given you support now that the vision is fully realized. I do have to ask, and this is incredibly petty, but I have to ask, do you still get that I told you so flutter when you see them sometimes?
Oh, um, gosh, no, with an asterisk. I'm sure if one or two people from way back when kind of crossed my path, maybe, right? Maybe that feeling would be there. I'd really have to search my like archive files in my brain to think who that would even be. But I think time marches on in such a unique way. And when you see really the value of life, right? It's interesting. A good friend of mine in the industry, Rob Masters, who's the head distiller over at Family Jones in Denver. There was a time, I don't know if it was last year. We all went to Denver to rally and do a fundraiser, and he was having an organ transplant and was recovering from cancer, his second round of very serious cancer, and being in that room and seeing so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people from across our industry, from sales to distillers to like all different, people who have chosen very different roles, you just see how time marches on, right? And I think it's a very humbling thing to, right? Like there's one thing to be in our like baby 20s and the industry is in a boom and everything feels really good and everything feels possible, right? And then real life hits, right? You see people who have been struggling to find partnership or create families or struggling with health and struggling with businesses. And these are real things. They impact people's lives. And so I think it does create a softness around any like, I told you so. It's like, okay, like everyone's doing the best they can. And I believe that people make decisions given their best intent and feelings that they've got in that moment. Right. So if they said no to me, I always go, great in my head, right? Maybe not to them, but like, thank you so much. Like, if you're going to say no, that's just not my path forward. So I'll just find another door to say yes.
And actually, we spoke to Jamie Burns from Family Jones back in, spoke to him in July.
Love
It's actually
Jamie.
the last interview I did before my daughter was born. So the episode didn't come out until October.
Oh,
But
congrats.
uh, it was a lovely conversation. Um, just moving as you've gone through the industry now, to flip the previous question, do you have any interest or has there been an opportunity for you to then mentor the next generation in some
Oh,
way?
yeah, thanks. So many. I've had some relationships where we've tried to formalize a mentor-mentee relationship. And then I have lots and lots and lots of informal mentor-mentee relationships. And it's such an honor. There's a lot of people that I can think of right in my head, and they're all at different points of their career. And in some ways, some people are much farther along than I've ever been. Um, or they've been very very senior in major corporations and then come in as entrepreneurs, and so you know it's just been beautiful getting to be a voice that people have sought um input and advice from, and people do it with such respect, right, and such reverence. Like they, like even you and I, like you're so respectful to understand the value of someone's time, that I feel like when a relationship and gets to gets to start with that as a foundation, like it really does feel so good to be able to share the wisdom, because I know what it's like to come up and not have any knowledge, right?
Sure. And to my point before air, what's the point of me asking the same questions that every other person has asked you?
Yes.
No point.
Exactly.
No point.
You can find that information out there already.
Exactly. So, just as a last point in the creation portion of the business,
Hmm.
you and sorry, this is a side note, but I feel like it's particularly when I have female guests, this tends to happen, and I don't know whether to apologize or not for it. We end up talking a lot more about the business side of it as opposed to the production side.
Cool.
I'm sure there's something to that about just more
Masculine
giving them
energy,
more,
feminine energy. Yeah.
maybe that, or just that. Um, I mean, I have a question later about women in whiskey and more about that and how much more respect and exposure they have now than they did even 10, 15 years ago. So I feel like I want to ask those questions instead of the production, because the production I can find out, but
Yeah.
these I can only ask person to person. So in that, you've said you found out quickly in thinking about starting the business that you weren't going to win the game in raising capital on your own.
Yeah.
As you said, you self-funded, but in your own words, you were an ex-ballerina, no business experience, making a French whiskey for a U.S. market that wasn't necessarily ready for it. Now in doing the research and listening to other interviews and presentations you've done, it seems like you're a pro. You're rolling off mocks and cogs and 10 steps to creating a business presentation. You have the inventory down. You've got, barrel to barrel what's going on at any given time. You've merged into Samson Surrey and then been acquired by Heaven Hill on top of that. So things have happened. Let's say, um, just to, I hate to condense this just a couple of minutes, but what was that on the job training like, going from having no business experience to enough to be teaching others about what they really need before starting a business and how to run it?
Yeah, gosh. I think oh man, like way back in the day, when like Twitter was kind of just coming out and stuff, and we were, and like memes were becoming a thing. I saw this wonderful meme that the image is like, it's still stuck with me, right? I don't have the meme with me. I could describe it though. And it was like, it was like like imagine like a graph, right? You've got the y-axis and the x-axis, and it's like a point that starts in the bottom left corner and then it goes up, and it's like a vertical line, and it's like what people think life is like. And then the next one was like what life is actually like. And it's, it starts in the same place, it ends in the same place, but the line in the middle becomes a giant hairball.
Mm.
It's like messy and you can't see through it. And I think it's always very easy and very buttoned up and very like perfect for a podcast, like turn around and look backwards and be like, oh, this happened to connect to this, to connect to this, and that. Because hindsight is beautiful in 2020.
Sure.
But when you're in it, you don't, you just have no idea. Like, I'm sure I was in more conversations talking about margins and markups and not realizing that those were two different mathematical equations.
Mm.
Right? Like, I'm sure I was. Can I remember being in them? No, because I probably didn't even see the mistake in real time. But I think for the learning aspect, it's about learning the distinctions and not making an assumption. I'm working on a new business now, and I was talking with a chemist, and I was like, wait a minute, let me just interject. I'm hearing you say this word and I'm hearing you say this other word. And in my mind, those are just synonyms for the same thing. And they were like, oh gosh, no, they're completely different things, right? They're completely different. And I share that anecdote to say, I think that's what it was like. I think I always felt like I understood what was going on. But as I progressed, I would learn distinctions, which would just further the nuance of my understanding of the industry as a whole.
Mm.
So, yeah, so I think you just, if you're lucky and you're bold enough to be humble, to own at least within your body and yourself when you're wrong, that's when your life expands exponentially, right?
Mhm. For sure. So again, I'm going to be skipping through some of the production things just for time considerations, but there are a couple of things that I just uh, could not skip over. So we'll talk about in the show notes things like the seed to spirit with the terroir focus, the production of barley varietals, the proprietary yeasts, more information about the alembic Charente stills, which I found absolutely fascinating. These look like Le Creuset. Uh, so one of your methods when Brenne was launching uh, was that you had bottled only, and sorry, this was, I think I said this earlier, but just to reiterate, this was a French whiskey made in France, but originally intended for the US market. If that was the first market.
Yes.
Um, so you originally bottled only single cask
Yes.
for the US to see what barrels consumers were loving. You'd pull the bottles that they loved back to France to develop that target flavor in conjunction with the consumer and with your distiller. Uh, I don't think I've seen anybody else do that. Certainly not that I've heard of. And it does take again those stones because you're putting out a lot, and people can taste that and say, okay, this is what I think it's going to be, and then eventually it's something completely different. But I guess the two-part question there is, the first one is uh, how long did it take for you to kind of dial in the exact flavor that you wanted what would become Brenne Estate Cask to be long term?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's so good. I genuinely don't remember um how oh wait, I do. Uh we launched in 2012 and 2017 was my first, is that right? Was that my first batch? Gosh, wait, maybe no, 2015. I think it was 20. I'm sorry, audience. I'm sorry for my brain fart here. Sorry for the
Okay.
pause. I, I think it was 2012 I launched, 2015 I launched Brenne 10 in the US, and I launched Brenne Estate Cast, the original one, in France. And in France was the first time when I launched there, I gave them batches. So I had been working from 2012 to 2015, bringing those bottles back to France, working on what does it take to get this blueberry muffin top, bananas Foster, creme brulee profile triangulated through a selection of X number of barrels. Could we hold that together in a batch and then get an entire production run that is uniformed in those flavor notes? And then we launched 2015 in France with our first batches. So they got 3 rounds of batches. So I almost guinea pigged our ability to batch barrels on the French market. And when I didn't get any negative feedback from France, from our distributor, from our retailers, our consumers, then I trusted our instincts and our skills enough to say, okay, we can start shifting the US from single cask releases over to our first batches. So yeah, that might have been 2017, might have been when the US got their first batches. So it might have been 5 years of single casks available in the States. I could be wrong on that number. I can't, it could have been 2016 for the US, but I definitely launched the batching in France first before I trusted myself to bring it over here.
Gotcha. And we should note if people are looking on like auction sites and things like that for the first
Ooh,
batches, barrel 251 is the first one.
you did your research.
Oh yes. I will never be accused of not doing the research. So barrel 251 is the original one because of labeling stuff that happened. I will leave it to the Samson and Surrey TV interview with Kyle McHugh to find more information about that. But yes, so 251 is the first cask, is cask number one if you're looking for it. If you find cask number one and it says cask number one, it's not. So don't try to pass me off on it.
Correct. You might find batch one in France if you're really savvy. But one way to tell what I think I can't remember at this moment, David, exactly how many barrels we bottled the very first time. But that entire run, I want to say it might have been like six, it was under 10. It could have been like 6 to 9 single barrels that created our very first bottling run. And all of those numbers on the back of the label for it says date of bottling, and then it still has on it MM/DD/YY. So
Right,
that's how you've got one.
Damn yeah, right?
Yeah. Damn yeah.
Damn,
Yeah.
oh, love it. Love it. To piggyback now, so you did this thing about you triangulated, as you said, those flavor profiles, and I have to say they're dead on in both the quote unquote original, the estate cask, which is the everyday Brenne, if you will, and then the Brenne 10 being just doubled, like intensified with all of this. I know at the moment of recording they're sold out, but more is coming. Very happy to see that. So I'm looking forward to trying it again. But I'm curious though. So you did the single barrels for the U.S. market to try to triangulate the flavor profile. Then you batched in France. Have you since adjusted any of the flavor profiles for maybe updated palettes or just a shifting profile?
That's a really cool question. Wow, that's a really cool question. No, I never, if I understood your question, I think you were asking like for different international markets.
I realize it could go both ways. It could be for different international. Let's try that again. Different international markets. So different profiles in the U.S. or France, Germany, etc. But I was thinking of it originally as the palette that was identified between 2012 and 2017. Maybe that's different than what the consumer palette is in 2025.
Yeah, very fair. I have always admired the Japanese approach to, quite honestly, so many things, mostly everything.
Me too, honestly. I'm fascinated by it. Yeah.
It's extraordinary. Talk about humility in a culture. I mean,
Yeah.
and respect. And in 2010, I think I was over there I had a lot of connections in Japanese whiskey back in the day. And I got to go over there and I was at Yamazaki and like whatever. But I knew before I went over, right? Their whole, like, what fascinates me is if you get to go to Balvenie or any of the heritage Scottish brands, and if they have a hammer ding in the side of one of their pot stills, and that still at some point needs to have that piece remade by Forsyth, their still maker, that they will make sure that Forsyth puts that exact hammer ding back in at that exact, level and depth of like whatever, because they think that may contribute to their beautiful experience, right? Whereas Suntory is like, oh my gosh, or many of the Japanese distilleries, we want to always be updating. We want to always be improving. We want to always be changing, and we want to always be challenging ourselves to get better. And then I think it's just about those who are the decision makers to define what better means at that time, right? better might mean better efficiencies on your production runs. Better might mean depth of flavor. Better might mean more neutrality of flavor. Like, I don't know. So for us, I've always taken better as more richness. Like you said in the beginning, I really like to, I don't want to be something that people smell and go, it's fine. I want them to either love it or hate it. And so I think you get that by like continuing to deepen down and get more and more bold. So that's always been interesting to me. But also, gosh, I was one person for the first 5 years, and then we were part of Samson and Surrey, and I had a team, and now we're part of Heaven Hill. And there's a lot more opinions and a lot more voices, and it's just absolutely stunning that this brand continues to exist, and now it gets to exist as the responsibility of others. So I'm available, I'm around, I'm shocked that I still get to consult with them, and I work with them every single year. And but we'll see. It's safely parked. It's like those original Scotch brands, right? That came out of the old pharmacies, right? Like if it was the like Gordon MacPhail's, right? Like it was their pharmacy and they had the barrels, and then they were just taking everyone's new make and putting it into their barrels in their pharmacies. And then it becomes these own living, breathing brands, right? Diageo now owns a bunch of different distilleries. So it's a similar thing for Brenne. It goes out from my full mama bear parenting control to having a lot of other opinions and voices. And so time will just tell of what it's going to be like.
I hope certainly that it does not change too much. So far, both Samson Surrey and Heaven Hill have shown themselves to be very good stewards of the brands that they purchase and acquire. We both know that there are ones that shall remain nameless that are not considered that well. So, anyway, so just to back up that point, in talking to Kyle on Samson Surrey TV, he said that when Brenne was first brought on in 2017, it was hard for him to see where Allison ended and where Brenne began, and vice versa. And I can definitely see that. Like, I mean, honestly, even today, as you've stepped back and there are more voices, there's still an element that you're still the face of the brand. People still meet you and say, "Oh, this is Brenne." And even when I was at the World Whiskey, what was it? World Whiskey Fest. I forget the name of but in Brooklyn in December of 23, when I got to taste the 10-year-old for the first time, the person that I spoke to, the brand representative who was there for Samson and Surrey, but she said, I asked a question, she didn't know. And she said, I don't know, but I can ask Allison for you. And it was still just that one step of removal. So even as you've stepped back, you're still very much, I think close enough that if something went wrong or someone starts saying, hey, this is tasting different, you'd know pretty quickly. Which is good.
I give Heaven Hill is now on their third generation, right, of CEOs, and Kate Latz and her husband Alan Latz are co-presidents, and I've been really excited to spend time with them over the last. I really got to know them a little bit better starting in June of last year, and have now gone down to Louisville a bunch, and the one of the first things I told them was my like genuine awe, right? It doesn't matter if it's whiskey or tech or whatever industry. Typically when a company is acquired, it's like founders out in 6 to 18 months. And their leadership in desiring to, I think it's so wise and it's so rich, and it shows how unthreatened they are by the founders, right? That Paul Haleko is still connected intimately with Few, and Dylan and Judah are connected with Vago, and they have me connected with Brenne, and it's just a really unique reality that you just don't see, let alone in the distilled spirit space. You just don't see across industry really ever. So I think it really speaks to the leadership of Heaven Hill, and I'm most impressed with how they run their company.
Absolutely. I would echo that fully. So back to the product, which is this is back in 2015. So this is when the flavor profile was still being kind of set up. I had to search for this interview, but
I can't wait
to give
to
you
do it.
a sense of this, this is, and I hope this is okay to say, I can cut this if you don't want me to. This was when you were still Allison Patel on the
Oh yeah,
title
you
card.
can it in. Yeah, of course.
So this is a while ago.
Yeah.
Um, you said you described your whiskey. This was the estate cask as Audrey Hepburn. The question
Oh,
was, it was, what movie star or figure does your whiskey kind of connect with? Saying that it was approachable, people feel good at the end of her movies. Um, it's you're entering 10 years later now. I'd say, would you use the same person? And then who do you describe for the Brenne 10?
oh my gosh. That's so beautiful. I forgot that I even said that. And I'm gonna be honest, David, like my new husband, my second husband, since I was a Patel and now I'm a Park, and that is my own name that I got to create. And I giggle with my husband all the time. I'll never take anyone else's name. Um, but the one game my friends will never play with me is any sort of trivia or name that celebrity. Like I really am so bad with names and kind of paying attention to big personalities. Um, I wouldn't even know. I'd be curious to know who you might think. Like what do those two skews evoke for you in terms of um yeah, kind of a household name or an iconic figure.
I mean, the Audrey Hepburn certainly works well for the estate cask. I think it's also, I would almost put it as like an Emma Watson as well. Like, regardless
Mm.
of the quality of the movies, people like since Harry Potter and post just kind of will always like her, regardless of what the movie is or how the movie does or what the point is. Um, and I'm just thinking of female celebrities. That's kind of how we describe brands. That's how we're taught. So it's hard to break out of that. The 10 is a little bit harder, just I know it does change from batch to batch, but um, I want to say I'm gonna go with the recently deceased in honor of. I'm gonna also go with the Harry Potter connection with Maggie Smith.
Ooh.
In that, in the same way that no matter how the quality of an Emma Watson movie is, they'll still like her. With Maggie Smith or even a Diana Rigg type as well, also rest in peace, that they'll do the same thing, but they will also elevate the movies and productions that they're in.
Mm.
So,
Mm. So flattering.
so that's how I would describe it. And given more time, I'll think of someone and I'll try to think of male celebrities as well. But that's how I would go.
No, I have to say, I feel like I always describe Brenne 10 as like, or Estate Cask as my poolside whiskey, right? It's
Mm,
fun, it's open, you can have it in cocktails, you can have it neat, everyone's invited to the party. Like people who think I'm not a whiskey drinker, you're probably going to be a whiskey drinker if you try Brenne Estate Cask,
yeah.
maybe, right? But Brenne 10, I'm always like, this is my fireside whiskey, right? Like poolside, fireside. My fireside whiskey is like, I want everyone out of my house. I want to shut my computer. I want to sit in a beautiful leather chair. I want to upgrade my French bulldog to like a hunting dog, right? Like
Mhm.
I might want to light a cigar. Like I just want that richness of the moment. It's a bolder whiskey. It's higher in ABV and proof, and I feel like Maggie Smith is such an amazing association. I feel like she would totally dig and say like a really quick-witted joke when you're sitting there in that leather Chesterfield sofa. I love that. I think that's cool.
Should probably run something off like, you got an American to convince a Frenchman to be able to sell their whiskey. This is still part of the World War II reparations or something. Um, I don't know. I just had to,
I
but
love it. I love it.
so I know we're running out of time quickly. We've only got about a half hour left with you, but there's one other question on the production side that I don't really understand why nobody else asked this. So here we go. So Brenne 10 has now had several batches. Each batch is slightly different, same kind of idea, but different profile from batch to batch. About 300 cases annually for the world. And I should say that batching is intentionally different, not just because. So said 7 barrels per year reach that point where they are available for batching for the Brenne 10. You use 4. What happens to the other 3?
Hmm. Uh, uh, they were held aside for some older expressions. And a lot happened during COVID. We definitely lost a couple of those barrels in a very soul crushing way that I don't think I'm allowed to share details, but my heart broke when I learned the news. I was really excited to do a like a 20-year or something, but it didn't get to occur. Um and yeah, I am very curious to see how they develop. I'm just curious to see how any of the additional barrels continue to develop. I'm very curious to see how people who are responsible now for the brand in a way that's more, with more authority than I have this at this time, to see what they decide to do. And yeah, Brenne had it was very interesting in 2018. I had a really good, can I share a ridiculous anecdote and a
Yeah,
story that I
please.
anywhere? Great. You're the first to get it. In 2018, so when I wrote the contract years and years and years ago between me and my distiller, it was like, I just want everyone to win, David. Like, if it's good for you, it's good for me. If it's good for me, hopefully it's good for you. Like, I want everyone to win. So if, it was the kind of thing where, like, if he didn't want to distill, he had to give me X number of years or make X number of, supportive moves, but he didn't have to distill this in perpetuity, right? And same for us, like, we didn't have to only distill it with him. And I was a one-person company. It was just him and his wife, and then they were having many beautiful new children. So it was always really fun to go over there and get to play with the latest baby and see all the little kids be growing up around the distillery as he had done. And, it was his grandfather. So it was watching the fourth generation. But in 2018, he sat down with me, and his head, I was in his house with his wife, and his head was in his hands. And he's just like, I am so sorry, Allison. I don't want to distill anymore for you. And I was like, okay. I mean, we definitely cried, right? It was a very emotional time, but it was also so beautiful because he started the conversation going, and this is very un-French, right? Like, this is not part of the French culture. He was like, you tell me all the time, like, what is it that I want to do? And what is it that I want to do? And I was like, yeah, like, what do you want? Like, what's going to make you happy in life? And he was like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I just need to detach from this. And I was like, okay, right? Like, again, we cried. It was very sad, but it was cool because he was like, my friends down the street have this beautiful distillery, and I've been talking to them, and we can definitely set the recipe in their distillery. The stills are so comparable. We have still this, they have all the same access to the same farmers because we've had to expand who was growing our barley, our organic barley. We grew beyond his own land. So we already had contracts with other farmers.
That was one of my questions too. So good.
Yeah, we can move the yeast over. Like, everything was really kind of idyllic, but it was a big shock. And I was like, okay. And so we went and we, like, visited the friend the next day, but I was still kind of like a teenager with my arms crossed. Like, I don't want this yet. Like, I want to decide who we go to. But I really loved this new distillery. And then and it was, for us, it was an extremely slow process to start to even consider moving, much less start actually moving. And 2019, there was just a lot of talk, a lot of logistics, a lot of what ifs about how could we's and all that kind of stuff. And then 2020 hit, right? And it was the pandemic. And then we came out of the pandemic, and ta-da, we sold to Heaven Hill. And it was like, whoa. But all the while we had been in these very slow talks. And what was so amazing for us is that one of the brands inside Heaven Hill is not probably a brand that is marketed towards the audience on this podcast, but it is a brand that is made in the cognac region of France, and it is called Hypnotic. And it is a blue club drink in a frosted bottle, and it is owned by Heaven Hill, and it is produced at this distillery. In fact, I remember walking in and being like, the charm was there. The distillery is so beautiful. The alembic stills are extraordinary. They had 5 more than we even had at our original place. And everything was like, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I bet if whiskey people saw that Hypnotic was on the bottling line, they might have a little opinion about that, right? Like we whiskey people might be opinionated, lovingly so. But it was like, one of those things that kind of sat in my brain. And then we made the sale to Heaven Hill, and I was like, this is incredible. They don't own that distillery, but they clearly have a very a strong relationship. So we had been working on rounds and rounds and rounds of distillation to perfect the new make at this new distillery. And so it was kind of one of those moments in life where you gasp at the miracle of synergy, right? That like we had just come out of this global pandemic, our companies had just been purchased and acquired, and yet this one crucially important detail for Brenne in moving from one distillery to another that we weren't talking about, we weren't telling the audience, we didn't want to create craze in the market with people being like, oh my God, it's going to change where everyone buy it up and, never buy it again. Like you never know how people react to news like that, which again, this is the first time I'm saying it out loud, but I hope it's okay to share. But I know that our first batches have been coming out, right? Like, so we moved a lot of our aged inventory over to there a long time ago. And we've been working on I don't know that the distillation runs have fully matured. So I don't think they're bottling yet from the stuff distilled at the new distillery. But I know that we're doing like our full, our major full blending and things there at the new place now, which is really beautiful. And we've got a lot of senior people from Samson and Surrey, even if like me, they're still on as consultants, but they've been intimately involved in flying them back and forth between France and the US and just making sure and giving me samples every time they see me. What do you think? How is this? Are you okay? Do you sign off? So I do sign off, but it's really exciting. And I really hope that with this change, the number 2 question I've gotten for Brenne's life is, I'm going to be in Cognac. Can I come visit? And I've always had to say no to people. And I just hope that with this change, they'll be able to start saying yes and accept visitors and show people where Brenne is now being made, which is really beautiful.
I think just again, I have not tasted side by side, obviously. It's not available yet for consumers.
Yeah, it's not available. Yeah, I haven't tasted it either. Yeah, at least it's aged, right? It's not aged fully yet. So
right, because the estate cask was about 6 to 8 ish years usually. So so we're just getting to that point where it might be ready, and it might take a little longer. You never know. Down the street can be a different microclimate, as we've seen. But we have seen also guests on this podcast and others who have let's say started distilling somewhere at contract distilling, but using their own recipe and such, while they're building a distillery for themselves and transition over to their own stuff. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's bumpy, but it always, so far at least, has always ended up where the brand wants to be. So the best I can say at this point is, obviously I hope that the same will happen. But I'm glad to hear that even though the original partnership has now effectively ended, that there's growth and longevity. What's the word I'm looking for? Continuity that is happening.
And security. Like I genuinely feel like the synchronicity of Heaven Hill happening to be our acquirer and having such a strong relationship with this distillery in Cognac, of the 1,200 distilleries that are there, it was so extraordinary. And I just feel really excited for Brenne and for the next generation of stewards of that brand, that they're there is such opportunity for expansion. So we shall all see.
Definitely. So I have just a couple more question topics for you, and we'll like I said, we'll try to fit them in. Which is, let's see, next one is a little more on the personal side, has to do with whiskey, but as a businesswoman, you spoke on Rose and Ivy about how you had to learn to not have as many burnouts,
Mm.
especially after you said years of being a one person team, and then even a team, but a smaller team at Samson and Surrey. This is an unspoken problem for many in the industry. And I've heard it from a lot of friends who are there, but they just don't talk about it. The constant travel, the frequent rejection, worrying about cash flows. Um, I think you may have answered this earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. At what point did you say, like, I need to make a change in this for my own health? And how did that change your relationship with the brand?
Mm. The first time I remember realizing that the brand was bigger than anything I could personally manage on my own anymore. I remember being in my office, my head upside down. I was like curling my hair because I was going off to, I'd been up since, I'm sure, started working at 8 in the morning. I knew I had an event that started at 8 o'clock at night. It was probably 4 in the afternoon. I had to get there and set up and everything. And I was trying to wrap up the office portion of the day so I could segue into the consumer and distributor networking aspect of the day. And yeah, I was like upside down, curling my hair with my toe, like trying to scan my phone to like load emails and read. And I was like, this is ridiculous, right? Like if I'm using my feet to try and load my emails fast, like this is ridiculous. But I think my answer is different than today than even what it was back then, because I stepped out, right? And yes, I consult, but I've had like 2 years of a sabbatical. And I didn't know the depth of my burnout when I stepped back. And I thought I would say to my husband, oh, I'm just going to rest for 3 months and then I'm sure I'll be fine. And I wasn't. And then and then I was like, oh, I'm going to take a year off and then I'll be excited to work again. And I wasn't. Right. And it was like only this past December, we're talking in March, early March. I woke up one day, it was a Saturday, and I went, oh, I really want to work again. Like, I'm so excited. I want to create, I want to build a new company. And it was the first time I felt ready. Like, it took me 2 full years to kind of rest and intentionally learn. Like, what I kept saying a year into my sabbatical was, if I started a new company today, the only way of working that I know is how I was at the end. And how I was at the end created this crevice of burnout. So I need to use this time that I'm not working to learn new behaviors and new ways to even show up for myself and to myself when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to being in action, when it comes to managing my days, when it comes to having a morning routine, but also a sleep routine, and like putting up boundaries where I need to put up boundaries, and taking large time off from drinking at all, which I'd never done. Right. So that has been really fascinating to me, to try and recalibrate. There was a great book title, and I haven't ever read the book, but the title alone became my mantra for the last 2 years, which was "What got you there won't get you," or "What got you here won't get you there." And so I was like, okay, like, to your point, I learned on the fly and I tried my best to perform as the best business person I could imagine. And so now that I have experience and knowledge and wisdom and connections, and I see kind of some of the pitfalls, I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's just approach this from a completely new way and see what could happen the next time we create a company. So TBD.
TBD. To So I promised myself that I was going to only ask one female or women specific question, because I don't like interviews to become about that unless it's meant to be about that. So here it is. Um, so in 2025, entering 2025, women in whiskey are more prominent than ever. um, not just as the face of brands or as hired faces, but truly representing the roles that they hold from at every level. And we're talking top spots at high profile companies, top spots at starting whiskey companies around the world. Um, this is a very different place, a very different perspective on women in whiskey than we had, let's say, just when you started in 2012, let alone in between. Um, from your perspective as a woman, as a businesswoman, as a business owner, any or all of these, what do you feel has been the biggest change since 2012? And maybe what's been the most surprising change?
Mm, great question. Great way of asking that. The most the thing that surprised me, that told me change had occurred, was for years when I would go to a restaurant, see Brenne on the menu, sit at a bar, order it, say to the bartender, "Hi, I'm Allison. I'm the founder of the brand." And it would take them 3 times to hear that before it clicked, right? They would think, people would say, "Oh, when you kept saying we at Brenne, we just thought that like you were an employee." And I was like, "Yeah, I said founder in the beginning, but that was okay, right?" And then people go, "Oh my God." And I go, "Yeah, just turn the bottle over, like see the name on the back. That's me. Like that's who you're talking to." And there would be an "oh my God" moment, right? And the thing that surprised me when I knew the industry had changed to the next level, we're not there yet, but to the next level, was when I could walk into a restaurant and be like, "Hey, I'm the founder." And they go, "Okay." And that was it, right? It wasn't a big deal. They weren't surprised to see a woman in her, well, now 40s, but then 20s and 30s, with long brown hair and white skin and no beer belly and no beard, say, "Yeah, I own a brand," right? It wasn't a shock anymore. So that was really exciting, right? That said, enough have come here. People have seen enough that they have registered in their minds that there's not one prototype of visual person that they think running a whiskey brand anymore. That's really exciting. That said, there is still a massive need for more women in more types spaces in this industry. I was speaking with a female CEO recently. They sat in a room with 19 people and they were still the only woman. And this was 3 weeks ago, right? And these are at general sales meetings, a lot of like seniors at high levels in distribution channels. There's still places that I think are opportunities to have more diversity across the diverse spectrum of opinion. And the reason that is, well, it matters for a lot of reasons. And it's like, what's just so crazy that there is still this conversation needing to be had is, if you want to stand firmly in the roots of capitalism and say, "Here's all the reasons we love capitalism," you might say, "Here's all the reasons we don't like capitalism." I don't really care where you are on that spectrum. But if we are in a capitalist society and you're standing in capitalism, the literally companies that have more diversity in their top level decision makers, in their boards, in the C-suite, have better profit margins, have better like books. Their income is better. Like, really? We're still going to debate this? Like, okay, it's one thing to have a philosophical debate, right? But it's another thing to be like, you have a fiduciary responsibility to increase your profit margins, to increase your, your growth, your EBITDA. And like, really, like all the stats show that if you've got some different opinions in the top decision making fields, you're gonna have more creative solutions and you're gonna do better. So we've got more space to go.
So just to make sure I didn't miss it. That was definitely the biggest change and the biggest uh, good change as well. That
Good
people are
change.
no
Yeah.
longer shocked. What about the most surprising change? Or was
Uh,
or was that included? I just want to make
I think
sure.
I think it was included. I think I was really
Yeah.
surprised because it really felt like an overnight shift. It felt like one day I just started going to accounts and people were not surprised anymore, but they had been surprised for 10 years, right? And it didn't feel gradual. It felt like there was a switch that got flipped across the country and across the world. A little less across the world. I feel like still people are a little surprised when they meet me internationally, but in the US specifically, I felt like it was a switch that happened overnight that they went, okay, you're the founder. What else you got? And I was like, yes, I've been waiting for that for so long. Great. The fact that I'm a woman should not be the thing. The fact that the whiskey is really wild and unique, that should be the thing.
Absolutely. The fact that the whiskey immediately makes you feel like you're eating a blueberry muffin with a creme brulee topping, that should be what matters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fully agree. There is a question I have about French whiskey in general, because there were four distilleries making whiskey before. There are many more distilleries, I should say, and you've said this as well, making cognac, armagnac, many types of brandies, Calvados, all these things. But whiskey specific distilleries, there were four. You were the fifth. There are at least 65 now, probably even more.
Over 120 now.
Over 120 now, right? So I think I may send you this question via email to give you more time to just like think it out and give me an answer on this, because I want to know like what you've seen over. But I'll just share the quote that is inspiring this question. So you said in 2021 on Spirit Speaking that, quote, "I do not think the world outside of France even knows the magnitude and variety of French whiskey that will become available over the next 5 years," unquote. And this is, we're 4 years on from that now. So I think I'll send you that question as opposed to doing it now, just because I have two other questions that I really want to ask. But I'll include that in the show notes.
Can I answer that really quickly, actually? Could I try it in one sentence?
Yeah, go for it.
I think the companies, there are so many brands in France, and I think they have permeated and are continuing to permeate the French market deeply and well. And I am surprised at how few have made it over to the US, but they have massive exports to Germany and to a bunch of other countries in Europe. So I don't think we've at all scraped the surface in what's available in the US. But if you travel to Europe, if you go to Whisky Live Paris, the French whiskey section is enormous now. It's wild.
It's a dream for me to go to either the Paris or London show. I'll take one of those.
Yeah.
Truly, it would be a dream. And I should say, just as a teaser to the audience, I have been speaking also on the side with Version Français and La Maison de Villiers, La Maison and Villiers, about some of their brands, Ninkasi, Glen Armor. These are Armoric, of course. These are brands that I tasted some new stuff from them. Just blew my mind. The variety that is there, that is so different from malt from Scotland, from India, from anywhere else. Even different from Brenne too, and really needs to be explored more. So, but we'll leave that for a little bit more, because there is so much there. So the second to last question, it's usually the last one, but I have a more fun one for the last one this time. The second to last question is on legacy. So in the presentation, and I really encourage people to watch this presentation, it can be found on YouTube, about 10 things you need for starting a business. One of them that really resonated with me was that you have to be easily understood and read, like an easy to understand name. And it reminded me of Annabelle Thomas at Nicknean and our conversation about having to shorten the name, an incredibly hard name, into a moderately less difficult name, just for market sake, honestly, more than anything else. And also this idea of branding and how you'll handle a bad review or negative reaction. Because as you said, if you want people to either love it or hate it, that means some people are going to hate it. So in terms of legacy, I'm making an assumption that your legacy may have changed from what you thought it might be when you were the only person doing the business versus then Samson Surrey, then now Heaven Hill. What do you feel like you want your legacy to be today for Brenne, and how has that changed?
For me personally, or for the brand?
Let's say both,
Oof.
because the last question is quick. So, you know,
I hope the brand continues. I really hope so, right? You never know. You never know in these kind of situations. You never know. Not that I think the people running Heaven Hill at this moment in time would ever do this, but it's not hard to assume that in a large organization, what if brand gets sold into like a Diageo or so, or like one of the big like a publicly traded company, right? Like it's not hard to look at to imagine someone in a financial role could look at what does it cost to run, what does it cost to make, what does it cost to man hours, what does it cost to market, what does it cost to sell, and what's the sales. And Brenne has never been a massive sales volume, right? We're not the low-hanging fruit, we're not an obvious brand. And so if people find us, if they buy us, if they fall in love and repeat buy us, thank you so much if you were one of those people. But every bottle makes a huge impact on the business. And so I hope that the legacy of the brand never has to come down to someone in a financial role looking at a spreadsheet and making a decision to cut the brand, kill it, sell it off or something. I really hope that the integrity of what has been established and created with the community that loves it and drinks it remains. And I hope that its story, right? I feel like we've made like everything that this brand has done in just a short 15 years feels like a fabric sample. And I hope that just the brand continues to grow. And one day we'll go, wow, that fabric sample is now a blanket, right? And I hope one day it's a giant tapestry. And so I can only hope that it continues to exist and exist in a way that has integrity and nuance and brings its really unique profile to people all over the world. That's what I hope for Brenne. For me, I hope that, I'll say I feel like legacy is a conversation that is difficult to have unless there's also a conversation about someone's choice of creating their own multiple generations, right? And I am a woman, and the kind of thought, the burden, right, of bearing a family would fall on my physical form. And I have chosen time and time again to not have children. And I feel very blessed that I have been able to make that choice as a choice in my mind, and I've never gone down the path of trying to have a child. So I don't know if my body would have made a choice for me, right? I don't know if I would have wanted children and maybe my body didn't let me or something like that. So I don't know, but as a human who has decided not to have children, and thankfully I've found some wonderful partners in life that have also shared in that vision, my legacy was never with Brenne to make a company that I would one day maybe pass down to my children, right? My desire was, can I disprove the people who would think that a ballerina with never having gone to business school, never taken a business class, all the naysayers, even sometimes in my own family, could I disprove them? Like, what if I could build a company that could get acquired? How cool is that, right? What if I could birth a company and have it be something that is kind, that is doing something different, that invites people to a table to try something and to an experience that is not a repeated experience, that's not repeatable, that is something that's totally unique to this one brand, that is a thing that's created and not copied, right? In a blind taste test, you can't close your eyes and go, oh, that tastes like this fill in the blank scotch. Doesn't happen with Brenne, right? So I hope that in my legacy, right? Like if I get to live a long life, I hope that people will be like, wow, she never let the grass grow under her feet, and she wasn't afraid to taste from a variety of experiences in life, right? I was a ballerina. I made a whiskey company. I could tell you, but I can't actually, what I'm working on next. It's similar, but it's different, right? Like I want to keep trying and new things and bringing things from thoughts and ideas that feel new and different and haven't been done before down from the vision and into physical form for humanity to come along and join and dance with me. So,
so I mean, thank you for sharing that incredibly personal side of what your legacy hopes to be. And I hope the same for both the brand and for you, and look forward to what you're doing next. So I wanted to end on something a little fun and uplifting. Not the legacy isn't uplifting, but still. So something that has
right?
Yeah,
When I
yeah.
die.
So something that's come up on multiple interviews and writings has been your love of pouring Brenne over some ice cream.
Ooh,
Although, as you said, not mint. Mint has not worked, but other ice cream. So it came up in a bunch, and I had to ask this as the last question. Specifically, when you were talking with Tim on Five Drinks for Midnight, you floated the idea together of partnership with Van Leeuwen.
such a great idea. I forgot about that.
I was gonna say either how's it going or can we get on that, because like they make such incredible like, honeycomb ice cream and Earl Grey and these different flavors that I could see them making a brand like blueberry muffin creme brulee ice cream, and they already incorporate alcohol into it sometimes. So
No, but if anyone from that company is listening, let's do it. Yeah, I definitely did not follow up or chase down, and then life just went at warp speed. So that's thank you for reminding me that that was even a thought that germinated and created between me and Tim. I love that idea. I still
if,
love the idea.
if Van Leeuwen won't do it, I'm sure either Emacabolio's or Ample Hills, keep it local, will do it as
Listen,
well.
I want your audience to, if wherever you advertise this on whatever social media channel, whether it's LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram or whatever, I want them to comment with their favorite ice cream flavor that they would pair with Brenne, or if they don't know Brenne yet, hopefully they get to, but like I would love to know whiskey and ice cream pairings. That's a fun. Yeah.
That is, we're so tired of doing the whiskey and meat, the whiskey and uh, whiskey
Yeah.
and desserts to a certain extent, but not so much whiskey and ice cream. And let's open that door a little more.
Let's open that door. I agree, David.
All right. So you heard her, folks. Comment, please do. I will let Allison know what some of the good responses are. Um, and no fish ice cream, though. We're not going the Iron Chef route. No fish ice cream. Anyway, with that, Allison Parc, founder of Brenne, thank you so much for spending time with me today. This is also being recorded the day before International Women's Day, which definitely needs to be noted for the achievements, the accomplishments, and the gains made for women in the whiskey industry. And most of all, just the fact that you're being recognized for what you've always done for hundreds of years as half of our species, for this industry and for us as a whole. So, Allison, thank you. Thank you all for listening. I hope to meet you soon in the city. And truly, thank you all for listening. I'll see you all next week.